I'm DeBose Porter, and I'm Executive Director of the Georgia Trust for Local News. Many of you know my background, but I run a nonprofit whose mission is to protect local newspapers. It is to protect and preserve local rural newspapers. We go from Hancock County to Harris County. We have just launched a new newspaper in Macon, and I'll talk about that a bit later, down to Albany, Georgia. We serve an area of Georgia that is probably economically the most challenged of any area in our state. So the truth matters when you're talking about the challenges of each community. And what we're seeing by refocusing the news to local news, Albany was owned by a hedge fund. We bought it and redirected it to local news. Macon was bought up by, Telegraph was bought up by a hedge fund. There were times there were no reporters, local reporters in Macon, Georgia. The Knight Foundation came to us and said, will you start a new community newspaper in Macon? We launched that 3 months ago. But it's about truth. It's about, and what we have seen is truly a renaissance in local news. People want the information about their communities, and if we don't do this, and we don't preserve this, then we're going to become fractured even more. Because in that void, you're either on one side or the other as far as the national narrative. So we have the importance of truth and keeping news local and serving local communities, I think, is as important now as ever. So that's the role that we can talk about that more in detail, but let me introduce this remarkable now. Liz Coyle with Georgia Watch. Liz, we'll come back. Let me introduce everybody, and I'll let you start it off. Dr. Bentinto Bass, Dean of the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication, Arizona State. Welcome here. We'll talk about how these things apply and what you're seeing nationally as well. And my friend Sean McIntyre, from the head of standards and practice at the AJC. We also serve on the First Amendment, Georgia First Amendment Foundation, which we're celebrating our 30th year this year. So let's start with Liz. Liz, your job is at the legislature and to the public in defining policy, getting the truth and what matters. Let's start with that.
Thank you so much, DeBose. So Georgia Watch is a statewide consumer advocacy organization. Some of you know us and some of you don't, but we do spend a lot of time at the legislature, and I spend quite a bit of time at the Georgia Public Service Commission that makes a lot of decisions that affect climate here in Georgia, as all of you know, I think. I wanted to start by sharing a little bit about my early career going back to the 90s and how I framed this conversation in my early from my early years. We know that for many, the truth is a threat to existence. And I'm thinking specifically about the oil and gas industry or the tobacco industry, right? And we know, because the truth has come out ultimately, and then the cover-up comes out. So in that context, I had the privilege early in my career to work with a company called SC Johnson, a multinational consumer products company. You probably know Raid, Glade, a lot of aerosol products. Well, at the time, Sam Johnson, the late Sam Johnson, was chair. And I think there are a few who might be too young, but I think most of you remember when the big crisis of the day was the ozone layer and the hole in the ozone layer. And guess what? It was determined that aerosols, chlorofluorocarbons, specifically chlorofluorocarbons in our hairspray, that's right, Monica, were causing the hole in the ozone layer. Now, Sam Johnson could have said, let's not tell the truth, because this could hurt my bottom line. My family company could be harmed if we acknowledge that my products are causing the hole in the ozone layer. But he didn't do that. He told the truth, and he led globally the movement to remove chlorofluorocarbons from our aerosols. Monica and I still use our hairspray every morning. It's okay, but he told the truth. So this was back in the 90s, and Sam was one of the leaders with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the President's Council for Sustainable Development, and a wonderful man from Georgia, Ray C. Anderson. I think most of you know about Ray C. Anderson and the Ray C. Anderson Foundation. Maybe you know his daughter and his grandson who are so involved. But Ray also, they had read Paul Hawkins' The Ecology of Commerce, and they understood the three-legged stool. That we cannot, it's not a matter of sacrificing our economic bottom line for the environment or for social justice. That's the three-legged stool. We don't get there if we don't solve all of those crises and issues together. It's a partnership, right? And so Ray and Sam together confronted the fact with Ray C. Anderson. It was the carpet company, and he said, no, we're going to change the way we manufacture carpets, and that too has had a significant impact on the health of our global environment. So to me, that's what really, when we're talking about truth, it's also about the courage to tell the truth and do that in the face of even your own personal interest. Because today we have, I can't remember which of the speakers said, but it really struck me, if the truth sets you free, then lies keep you captive. And so many of our policymakers today are held captive by the need to feed the red meat to their constituents, and that's what we're up against.
Yes. Which reminds me again the importance of local newspapers. Because if you believe what they print on the sport page and get the scores right in a local football game, they don't believe you when you write about Medicaid expansion or whatever you know that. When the rivers polluted with mercury from the coal ash or coal falling into Georgia's rivers. So it's having that credible source too. So with that, let me go to Sean McIntyre. Sean, you're the guru or the gatekeeper for truth and goodness at the AJC. AJC has a particular role in Georgia that is unique. And over the past couple of years, and let me just say this publicly, kind of where should we be? And in the last year, they have started realizing the importance of what they do and the impacts they have. And they're now putting reporters in local communities around the state. At the Macon Melody in Macon, Georgia, Joe Kovac works for the AJC. He is in our newsroom. We share stories that give a broader impact. So, Sean, talk about the importance of truth and where you see the AJC and their role in the state in maintaining and showing its importance. Go ahead.
Sure, thank you. And thank y'all for being here. This is my church, so I'm so proud to have everybody here. It's great. I am the head of standards and practices at the AJC. That's a role that kind of tries to navigate when we might be going off the rails a little bit, or we might have a great debate about what is the truth, or the way we phrase the truth, or the challenges of telling the truth. And so what I want to tell y'all as news consumers is something that probably might not be totally popular, but there is no one knowable truth every day in the newspaper. People say, just give us the facts. And I'm like, yeah, the facts take a little while to gather. Depends who you ask. Depends what you call a fact. Everyone wants to believe that their truth is the truth. And I would just say news organizations try to get the best available truth every day and improve on the truth every day. And this is something that news consumers need to understand, because the only way to get at the best possible truth is have more inputs. The more inputs you have, the better truth you're getting. And that's true for y'all too, as news consumers. And so I'm going to just give one little example of the kind of debate we have in newsrooms that folks might not think about. But those people who went down to the Capitol in January after the last national election and voted as Trump electors, voted for Trump to become the representative, the elected official of Georgia, the electoral votes of Georgia. We've had big debates in the newsroom and in the industry about what you call those people. And a lot of folks want to call them fake electors, And a lot of folks don't want to call them fake electors. Are they fake electors? Are they contingent electors? Are they Trump electors? That is a really good and difficult debate to have, because some of it gets into, I think, and I know this won't be popular, but if you're going to call someone a fake at something, they kind of had to know they were faking it, right? So then that gets into their motivation and their minds. And different people will tell you what they were told about why they went down to the Capitol, why they voted, what they were voting for, what they believed was possible, if they thought they were doing an important civic duty, or if they thought they were trying to steal an election. Okay, you can explain all that in a long story, but what do you do in the headline? And so the words that we choose, the inputs that we get, the feelings and understandings we have of the people who are involved are what help us as news organizations get to the truth. We all agree the truth is important, right? But whether you're on one side of a debate or another, you agree. No one says, well, let's all figure out the lie and go that way. It's really about who believes what truth. And our job at the AJC is, of course, to continue to build on the truth as often and as consistently as we can in all news organizations and tell that. Just to comment on what DuBose said, I am a huge fan of local news. I also believe, the role of the AJC as a statewide voice is very important. And I did want to comment on what DuBose said. We are growing and expanding in the face of a time when a lot of news organizations are declining. Many of you know we're family owned in Georgia, and our family, the Cox family, has invested very heavily in keeping the AJC strong, because they believe that always seeking the best truth is essential to our well-being in Georgia. And our mission is to improve the lives of all Georgians and to try and provide information that allows that to happen.
Thank you, Sean. In the same way that in the rural areas, we're trying to protect the information to be correct and factual. And the truth does give the impact and reaction to the community when you give those challenges. So you have the metro area, you have the rural area, you have the policymakers. But Dr. Batts, what are you seeing nationally? What are the trends that you're seeing when something that we never thought we'd ever hear of an alternative fact? I mean, that's kind of a newspaper person, that kind of blows us away. What are you seeing in your research and your teaching and as you watch this national narrative on the matter and value?
Well, DuBose, we're obviously confronting what I would call I would equate it to a public health crisis, in the sense that we're combating mis and disinformation, and we have an inability largely to coalesce around truth and facts. And so it is something that we are working to confront, at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State. And I'm proud to be here on this panel today with others who are confronting this very real challenge. But I want to go back for a moment and think about some things that my friend David Orr said in talking about the evolution of democracy and Democracy 3.0. And what came out of Democracy 3.0 was, the enshrinement of freedom of the press and freedom of speech as part of the system of checks and balances in our democracy. And as someone who has devoted his life to two things really primarily, and that's journalism and education, I feel a need, and especially being here in church, to apologize to you. To apologize to you on behalf of journalism, because we got out of relationship with communities. And because we got out of relationship with communities, that allowed this chasm to open, and for people to not believe the facts that we were putting in front of them. And so it is great to see the efforts that's happening at the AJC and happening in your organization and others that are seeking to rebuild those relationships with communities, and so that we can move forward together. But this isn't going to happen overnight. This is a result of the evolution of the journalism model and how we deliver journalism and the advertising model and how, technology broke that model apart, and with the advent of the internet and social media and all those things. But now, what I would offer is that actually we are set up for a much healthier approach to journalism and to support our democracy, because we have many more voices that can be heard. And so the point is, though, we have to reconnect with our communities. We have to make sure that all voices are heard, all perspectives are heard, so that we can come together and solve key problems like this problem with climate change.
One thing that we have been challenged about in rural Georgia is how to reach the readers, how to reach people. We cover 19 communities, 19 counties that we serve. But we're going through a real change in technology. We went to the Woodruff Foundation and talked about the challenges where you don't have broadband, everybody has a phone. So they gave us a grant of $1 billion to transform these small newspapers who would never have had the chance otherwise. And it's not like it's perpetual. This is the transition to be where people are. And the response has been phenomenal. Yes, we have 19 newspapers in 19 communities in the heart of Middle Georgia. But when you overlay the digital opportunity, it is 900,000 people. It is 1 in 10 Georgians. So the reach of using and being where people are and making that move into that digital space that rural newspapers never had that opportunity to do, we're seeing a tremendous response from readers. And as we, it's wonderful information to get from technology, we're seeing that 75 to 80% of the people who are engaging with us as new folk, they're engaging on their phones. And they're engaging in numbers way beyond what we thought would have been possible in a Johnson County, in a Talbot County, in a Duluth County, in a Wheeler County. We're seeing huge response in Macon and Houston County and Daughtry County by making this change, but we are seeing that engagement in a very granular level on the ground in this part of rural Georgia that a lot of people have left behind. So let's talk about the reach. How are you touching people with information on policy that you touch on? How are you changing that? How are you redirecting that, and what is your response now?
Community health workers. So I really appreciate that question.
Sure.
Georgia Watch worked really at the intersection of public policy and community building. And we recognize that our elected officials need to be held accountable to the people who voted them into office. We're grateful to the AJC and our local papers and our national publications for helping to get the word out about some of the issues in ways that they can digest and believe. There are too many forces out there now working to have the opposite effect. And so we know that it's important that trust and truth and credibility are key. Community health workers work across the state of Georgia. They are in community, they have the lived experience of community. And so we've had the privilege since 2018 to lead the Advocacy Coalition for Community Health Workers. We've grown to over 200 members of the Advocacy Coalition, and we're working to get at the legislature certifications so that their services can be Medicaid reimbursable, right? It's a workforce issue. But what we've learned is if we can uplift the voices of community health workers, they are uplifting the voices of their communities. They're speaking for their communities. And we're able to speak credibly with lawmakers about what their communities are telling us they need. And we're looking at yes, public health and chronic disease, but also the crisis in access to maternal care, but also access to quality fruits and vegetables, and whether or not you have sidewalks in your neighborhood, and all the things that we can build the capability in community to advocate for those very basic needs that are human rights needs. And it's not our job to come in and tell a community what they should want, But we do have a responsibility, we believe, to tell them what they have the right to have and who to go to make sure that they get what they're supposed to have.
Thank you. Dr. Beth, what are you seeing nationally on this?
Sure. So, there's a lot of momentum nationally around, again, I talked about, the break in the relationship, but there's a lot of momentum nationally to rebuild the relationship and the evolution of the model of how we deliver journalism in these nonprofit organizations that are springing up across the country. I had the pleasure of spending about 6 years in philanthropy, and actually the Scripps Howard Foundation in Cincinnati, and working in collaboration with other organizations across the country who were seeking to reseed journalism in communities and providing some support to make that happen. And so there's a lot of these nonprofit organizations that are springing up, and I think that provides us hope, and helping to cover news deserts, and then also in communities where you wouldn't necessarily think of it as a news desert. I wouldn't have thought of Atlanta as being a news desert, but you all are really leaning in to local news. And the same thing in Phoenix, but it's happening across the country. But I also believe that higher education and the role that we have is, really provides an opportunity as part of our service to the communities, that we're a part of. We need to help to support the journalism infrastructure. And what that means is partnering with news organizations that are there, helping to provide resources, doing joint fundraising, and also, of course, training our students to be the journalists and communicators, not only for tomorrow, but for today. And so I'm hopeful. I think that we're in a turning point, but there is momentum that is pushing us forward. And I think that people recognize, especially with where we are right now in our politics and being so divided, there is a desire. There's a desire amongst our students at the Cronkite School. There's a desire amongst students at other schools across the country who I get an opportunity to interact with, to serve. Don't underestimate these students of today. Just because we may not understand everything that they do, there's a heart of service within them, and that they're concerned about tomorrow and being a part of the solution to create a better society. And so we're leaning into that desire to serve and to help them to make a better tomorrow, and they're using their skills in journalism and communications to do that. And so it's our role as people who have come before them and walk along the path to help to inspire them, to provide opportunities for them, to provide resources, and to make connections so that that passion that they have, that we provide them vehicles that they can utilize.
Thank you. We're seeing that in Middle Georgia. What we're seeing, we now head up the Center for Collaborative Journalism at Mercer. They just named it for Rich Murphy. And our job is to attract the young, smart people who want to do this work. And we're excited about seeing the tremendous response from all of the universities there, Fort Valley State, Wesleyan, Middle Georgia State University, and we have the cohort program at Mercer that are working with our reporters in our newsroom. We're trying to train that next generation of smart, good journalists with the right heart and mind that really believe in truth and facts. Sean, what do you see in that at the AJC?
Yeah, well, I'll speak a little bit broader than the AJC, but I'm real optimistic about rebuilding those relationships, and part of that is, I would say, young people, students, and a concerted effort across journalism to diversify the people in journalism. It is traditionally, it was sort of a tradesman's craft of, when I came in the newsroom, there weren't that many women, there were not that many people of color. That's telling a little bit more about my age than I want to. We worked to change that, but the things that have most significantly helped diversify journalism and the voices in journalism, which is truth. I'm going to tell you, diversity in journalism is essential for journalism to tell the truth. We can't tell the truth if we're not made up of a collection of people who have different views. More inputs, more truth, right? So there are now, news organizations in Georgia, across Atlanta in Georgia, that speak to different groups. There's Asian journalism organizations. There's Capital B is a journalism organization that tells through a lens for black people. There's a lot of different kind of inputs into journalism that have never been there. People think journalism is in trouble. There's actually probably more journalism than ever. It's just the money problem that we got to solve. But we in the AJC are, of course, always working to become even more diverse. But I think your university is constantly doing that, putting new journalists in the field. And as you say, they're passionate, they're committed, and they come with a different lens that is important, because we need more lenses and more input. So that, I'm optimistic about journalism because of that.
I am too, even in rural Georgia. And let's talk about this election. What are we doing to educate and inform our readers and our communities? Knight Foundation came to us and the League of Women Voters, and we're printing a voter's guide for Middle Georgia. A lot of people don't know who has Sunday voting, when is Saturday voting, just enough votes and information. Not partisan, we're not selling any ads to candidates. And we're going to publish this and put it in all of our newspapers when early voting starts. And it's just the how-to, just information to engage our readers to help turn out this civic responsibility of voting by just giving the facts, the truth. Let's go through the panel on what you're seeing. Liz, what are y'all doing to?
I'm going to think back to the conversation I had just a little bit ago. I was at table number 2 with some real stars. And I was struck about the conversation we had with people, and Mary Margaret Oliver said, ask somebody, are you going to vote? And what is it that maybe is a driving reason that some of our young people are not interested in voting? And Naomi Tutu said something I found very powerful. I was watching the DNC with your children, and there was I hope I'm saying this right, and it's fair that I'm saying it to this whole crowd, that there was a real skepticism that a young person should be asked to vote for any candidate when they wouldn't allow a Palestinian to speak at the convention. And another, someone who was at the table talked about, and she's younger, and she talked about how important it is to actually listen to the youth and not just assume that they're not voting because they're too busy with their iPhones or, just being young. There's a reason. And to Mary Margaret's point, if we don't ask, are you going to vote? And if you get an answer that suggests skepticism, listen for the reason. Because I've got, 2, grown sons now, and I'm proud to say they both vote, but the generation that's coming along now has lived through January 6th and have lived through this climate crisis, and they don't feel heard when they've been sounding the alarm there as well. So,
thank you. I need to add, we are putting it out digitally as well. I realize that our printed newspaper does not have the capacity to go viral, but the stories that we do and the extension of that, they do. And it's important that we understand that, and by having smart young people in our newsroom, help get that accomplished too. What are you doing on the election this time?
Well,
then I want to talk about some things now.
Yeah, I'll go to right where you just said, which is the digital newspaper of the past, which, I have a friend who jokes that the newspaper was the first mobile news source because you could put it in your pocket and carry it around. But you couldn't deliver it that way. We've invested heavily in politics. We obviously swing state educating people, doing all the traditional things. We have the voter's guide. We have all the stories about issues. We have all that. One of the things I'm most proud of is that we expanded our Politically Georgia podcast into a radio show. It is digital. It has much reach. It has fabulous guests like Mary Margaret's been on it, I know, a couple of times. Some of the smartest people in Georgia talking about politics and elections and things you need to know. And it's 5 days a week, and you can get it on your podcast or your radio across Georgia. And I think that's one of the best things we're doing to really reach Georgians on their issues.
Agreed.
Now, Professor, give a short thing about nationally, what are people doing to turn out and inform voters, and then we'll.
Yeah, so, you know, I always like to say that being in Arizona, we're really at the forefront of everything. And I tell students who want to come to ASU and talk with their parents, you know, come to the Cronkite School, that you're going to get to practice in the most relevant laboratory for journalism and communications that there is right now because of where Arizona is. I mean, being, you know, it's going to be a swing state, and we're getting a lot of attention, so much attention that we almost got chosen to hold, that there was going to be another debate between the candidates. They were actually looking at having it at ASU and at our school. But I'm also very proud that our students, who are part of the student chapter of NABJ, worked with the League of Women Voters to recently host a information session for voters in Arizona. And so again, I see that these sorts of things happening not only at our school, but at other programs across the country. And so the students who are studying journalism at this particular time are obviously very, very connected to the role of journalism in this presidential election and in just where we are, you know, as a country and how we're looking to move forward. So I see a high level of engagement, a high level of fresh ideas and ways that we can work in collaboration. And so that's the thing I would say that's different now, is that, you know, I've been at this for now 35 years, and the level of collaboration that I'm seeing across the industry and in higher education and in communities is greater than I've seen at any other point, and that makes me hopeful.
We see that in urban, we see that in rural Georgia too. All right, the bell is rung.